Rules Committee to come to order, and thank you very much for joining us today for another beautiful day at the Rules Committee. Today, the committee will consider H.R. 4775, the Ozone Standards Implementation Act of 2016, H. Con Res. 112, expressing the sense of Congress opposing the President's proposed $10 tax on every barrel of oil, and H. Con Res. 89, expressing the sense of Congress that a carbon tax would be detrimental to the United States economy. Under the Clean Airs Act, National Ambient Air Quality Standards Program, the EPA sets standards for criteria, pollutants, including ground-level ozone. Unfortunately, the EPA, in my opinion, has done a terrible job of implementing and properly scheduling new ozone standards, often not providing enough time for initial standards to be met before lopping on another set of requirements to be met. H.R. 4775 allows states to pursue cost-effective and practical implementation of the EPA's ozone standards. It makes common sense adjustments to facilitate how air quality standards are implemented based upon practical experience. Dr. Brian Shaw, chairman of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, testified, I believe correctly, on this bill, and he states, the bill simply provides for additional time with the implementation of the latest standards, but it does not roll back any requirements that are in place. In other words, allowing states an opportunity to meet the federal requirements that the EPA places in front of them. A sound and practical, common sense solution. But, Dr. Bustani, that's a Texan for you. The committee will also consider H.Con. 89, expressing the sense of Congress that a carbon tax would be detrimental to the United States of America's economy, as well as H.Con. Res. 112, expressing the sense of Congress opposing the President's proposal of adding a $10 tax on every barrel. I believe that the American public does not need what would be not only new taxes, but higher fuel cost. And it will surely be passed on at the pump, which means that families, businesses, and the American public would be paying more and more money at a time when it's unwarranted. Common sense reductions will allow the House to categorically reject the President's proposal. This common sense resolution does that. It protects poor people, it protects elderly people, it protects those on fixed incomes. It protects families, who many that I know, who as a result of either a husband, a wife, a brother, an uncle, a cousin, a child, meaning an older parent who might have a member of the military who has a larger vehicle to take into account usage by larger vehicles for men and women in wheelchairs, and disabled families that have to take care of their loved ones would have to pay a lot more money just because of raising taxes on oil. All Americans do not need an unnecessary and burdening tax and a larger money at the gas pump. So, we have two awesome members that are here today to not only bring forth and to talk about these ideas, but also their positions therein. I'm delighted to see Ranking Member Levin. Sandy, I'm glad to see you back again. And we welcome the young gentleman, the chairman from Louisiana, Dr. Charles Bustani, a distinguished young man who not only represents the Energy and Commerce Committee, the Ways and Means Committee, not only is he an expert on these issues and ideas, but is bringing forth the ideas that have passed the committee. So everything that you have in writing, without objection, will be into the record. And before we go to hear from both of you, I'd like to yield to the gentleman, the distinguished gentleman, my friend who I haven't seen for a week, Florida, And the gentleman's recognized for any opening statement you'd like to make.
Thank you very much,
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I don't have very much to say, save the fact that I feel very strongly that we're here again on a couple of matters that are important, but at the very same time are not going anywhere. And therefore, I seriously feel that the purpose of these resolutions is messaging more than substance. I personally, because of my continuing concern for the Zika crisis, believe that we would be better served with our time dealing with something that is going to be a real problem for us. And just for the record, while this oil barrel tax might be problematical for some, I think Congress needs to stand up to its overall responsibilities. And over a year ago, I personally would have advocated a 10-cent gasoline tax so that we could deal with the infrastructure and some of the things that are desperately needed to be done in this country. I thank my friend for the time, and it's good to see you after a week. And I hope when July comes, I don't see you for a couple of months.
Me too, Judge. Thank you very much. Gentlemen, in fact, Judge Hastings and I represent a lot of ideas that we have about each other. We try and work together. We talk about issues and ideas, and Judge Hastings is no stranger to being able to speak directly to me and me to him. But the bottom line is we do work together up here, and we're delighted that both of you have come to do that and believe that even when we disagree, we can listen thoughtfully, artfully, and ask questions. And Mr. Levin, you know that we're open to that. And you're going to get a chance to hear from one of your favorite colleagues now. The gentleman from Louisiana is recognized.
Well, thank you, Chairman Sessions and members of the committee. I come before you today to address two pieces of legislation that the House will consider this week. H. Con. Res. 89 would express the sense of Congress that a carbon tax would be detrimental to the United States economy, and H. Con. Res. 112 would express the sense of Congress opposing the President's proposed $10.25 per barrel tax on oil, equally detrimental to the economy. I believe these two resolutions will send a very clear signal to the American people that we oppose misguided policies that would drive up energy prices for families and businesses, and even beyond that, even beyond the impact it has on the energy sector. A carbon tax generally, and President Obama's specific proposal for an additional tax on oil in particular, would have serious detrimental impacts on the entire U.S. economy. Such tax proposals are unwarranted and transparent grabs for revenue. The adverse economic effects of such taxes would be felt throughout the economy, falling hardest on those most vulnerable among us, the poor, the elderly, those living on fixed incomes. The proposed tax increase on every barrel of oil would translate into an increase, certainly at the pump for gasoline. Some have said approximately 25 cents per gallon for the American consumer. It kind of depends on other assumptions, but a carbon tax would increase the price of gasoline, natural gas, home heating oil, electricity, and on and on. American families would feel the pain when they buy gas or diesel needed to get them to their jobs. American families would also feel the pain when they turn on the lights or adjust the thermostat in their homes. And also, this would have a broad impact on U.S. competitiveness at a time when the energy sector really helped drive our U.S. economy out of the recession, and now we're feeling a great deal of difficulty with the energy sector because of collapses in commodity prices. The refining sector is doing very well, and we have seen exports now for the first time in many decades. These taxes would then hit the refining sector, killing a lot of jobs and really, really hurt American competitiveness globally, putting us at a marked disadvantage with regard to competitors in Asia and Europe. The cost burden of the President's proposed additional tax on oil or of a carbon tax more generally would correspondingly increase the prices of everyday necessities, consumer goods that require the use of energy resources in their production, manufacture, transport, or distribution. In short, everything from a carton of milk to a pair of shoes to a bicycle to an automobile. Makeup, plastics, the list goes on and on and on. The price increases on goods with fixed demand would result from such taxes would devastate the millions of Americans whose incomes force them to budget carefully in advance to afford the basic necessities of life. In addition, these taxes would hit at a time when the industries they target are experiencing dramatic job losses and economic stagnation. The Labor Department reported that in the month of May, this past month, the oil and gas sector lost 1,700 jobs and the coal industry lost 1,600 jobs. Now is not the time to debate placing additional burdens on these industries that are trying to help all of us keep the lights on. These two resolutions make clear that we oppose policies that would drive up energy prices, damage the U.S. economy, reduce American gross domestic product, and hurt American jobs. I'm happy to yield back, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Sandy, we're delighted that you're here. Welcome back. Good to see you. Gentleman's recognized.
Nice to see you again,
Yes, sir.
all of you. You know, I think these resolutions epitomize what's going on here. There's real work to be done, and under the leadership of the majority here, it isn't being done. Mr. Hastings, you mentioned Zika. It is inexcusable that we're not acting, that we haven't acted already. The budget, where is it? This is something real. Minimum wage, acting on it would be real. Plugging some tax loopholes would be real. And acting on Flint, I've been there several times. I don't know what more it takes to get this place to do something real. And so instead, we have sense of Congress resolutions. And I think what is real is climate change. And there are too many of you in the majority here who are in denial. And it was just last week that the CBO, appointed by a director that was essentially suggested by the majority, it released a report. And that's what I thought I'd talk about for just a couple minutes today. And it talked about the potential impact of climate change on the federal budget. And the report said the cost of hurricane damage is projected to be $35 billion more than it is today because of climate change. And here's what the report said. I quote, "Human activities around the world, primarily the burning of fossil fuels and widespread changes in land use, are producing growing emissions of greenhouse gases." End of quote. So I guess the stage is set. You're going to bring these up this week. There isn't any action on real things. So I guess Friday morning, is it? We're going to take up two sense of Congress resolutions when we have all of this undone business that is real. And so really what makes sense for Congress is to get busy under your majority and to try to work it out on a bipartisan basis on these real challenges to the American public. So it was said here you're sending signals. How about doing real work? I yield back.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bustani, thank you very much for not only your thoughtful bills, trying to bring to our attention the real impact of raising taxes on oil and how it really causes a distortion in the marketplace of people who want to have jobs. And I want to thank you very much for doing this great work. Mr. Levin, is your answer a Kyoto-type answer? What's your answer? You talked about doing real work related to climate change? Is that raising taxes on oil? What is the real work you want done?
It would be nice if we had some bills that came out that addressed it.
Like, what would like some of those ideas, we're an ideas body up here, what would some of those ideas be?
I think we should think about everything, not tear down the ozone legislation, not go after the administration. Look, I come from Michigan, and we had a battle over emission regulations. And so it was easy for us to stonewall it. In a sense, these resolutions are stonewall efforts. They just say no. So instead of just saying no, with John Dingell taking the leadership, my brother on the other side, Senator Carl Levin, and a number of us from industrial America, including some members of your distinguished body, we sat down and tried to figure out what would accomplish both objectives, addressing environmental needs and the manufacturing base of this country. And we essentially came to a conclusion doing real things that has turned out to be positive. So I think essentially we should put lots of ideas on the table. Lots of ideas. And not simply pass a sense of Congress resolution, which isn't going anywhere, and I think opens up all of you to essentially acting more politically than in terms of something concrete. So I say let's put lots of ideas for climate change, addressing it on the table. But you don't put anything on the table except a sense of Congress resolution. So, I mean, look, I'm just repeating myself. I just want to finish. I listened to the head of CDC. This majority is being reckless on Zika. Reckless. And there's an inability of the majority in the House to come to terms with the majority in the Senate. And Flint, I just can't tell you, Mr. Chairman, how frustrated I feel having been there several times and having people poisoned, and this Congress majority doesn't come up with the funding to help address this. And I'm not interested in the political ramifications of the Flint situation, like we all need to consider the problems that the people face and the money it's going to take to rectify. That's what you should have legislation in front of you relating to Zika. There's been some, it's inadequate. Flint, it's inadequate. It hasn't really happened, as well as all these other things.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. 2 weeks ago, we had a bill on the floor. We are well aware that there was a request from the administration that we openly sought, and the request was over 5 years, $1.9 billion. The appropriators looked at it and said, how about if we do $1.2 billion over the next 5 months? That wasn't enough. So the bill didn't go anywhere. I thought that was a pretty good compromise. So while I want to sympathize with you, I think $1.9 billion over 5 years was what the president asked for, and I thought we were $1.2 billion, and I thought that was pretty common sense.
I suggest then you bring the head of CDC before this committee.
Well,
And listen to him indicate They need to develop a vaccine, and they need the $1.9 billion.
So,
And that's what's going to save life. They've got to have the guaranteed funding beyond the next months.
okay. So, but that's all we're trying to do right now in this cycle. We're trying to make sure the money's there. So I did not have the head of the CDC up, but I did have the head of the NIH up. And the head of the NIH, that same week that we did the bill, stated with Republicans and Democrats, senior members of the Energy and Commerce Committee there, that there was a belief that they did need money. And they did authorize and use $600 million. And that they did want and need the $1.2 billion. And they felt like when I told them, and we've stated in this committee, and I believe that the gentleman, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, Mr. Rogers, has stated, when they come back and say they need more than that $600 million or that $1.2 billion, we'll be glad to entertain that request. But that what happened is that they came up with the $1.2 billion for 5 months and would evaluate what was happening as we go into next year and we do appropriations. So I think we're trying to offer something that may be a couple $100 million less than the 5-year plan, but I think that I think it's unfair to say we're reckless in any way when we have provided in 5 months a vast sum and have told them, if you need more, you come back. But go do something with what you've got. And I know the gentleman is going to want to hear from Dr. Michael Burgess, who is a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, who has expressed his opinions on this. And so I would move now, I thank you very much, I would move now to the gentleman from Louisville, Texas, Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Everyone on this dais is familiar with my feelings on this. The administration comes to us and says, we've got to have money, we've got to have it right now, and yet they won't move from their entrenched bureaucratic positions on a number of other things. And look, if we're serious about this, why is there not a level 3 travel restriction coming from the CDC right now, on those countries where the Zika virus is prevalent? The cases of Zika virus in this country right now have been acquired elsewhere and brought here, with the exception of 2 cases where there was personal transmission of someone who was infected elsewhere, came to this country and affected a family member. I don't understand why there is this reluctance to talk about this. Are we worried about upsetting the travel and tourism industry? Are we worried about upsetting people connected with the Olympics? I don't know, but yeah, there's a inferno raging in South America and Central America, and why won't we recognize that? Why does the Food and Drug Administration continue to treat the genetically modified mosquito, which could be an ace in the hole as far as vector control is concerned? Why are they treating that as a new drug application and not an agricultural product? I don't know, Mr. Levin. I don't know why the administration is behaving the way it does. I do think Mr. Rogers came up here, the Chairman Rogers of the Appropriations Committee, outlined some money that's available right now. It took the administration 2 months to accept the $600 million that was available in leftover funds from the Ebola problem. That request was given to them in February, and it was 2 months later before they acted upon it. Now Mr. Rogers, Chairman Rogers, is proposing another $600 million between now and the end of the fiscal year. That's $1.2 billion that is available right now for fighting this. Yeah, I want Dr. Fauci to get that vaccine. I want that thing to roll off the assembly line as quick as possible. But there are some things we could be doing now that we're not doing, and the administration, in my opinion, the administration is the one standing in the way of those things. So I do take a little bit of exception to the observation that we're not doing enough up here. I think we have been doing a lot up here in the Rules Committee. Thank you, Chairman Sessions, for that. I just question, where is the participation from the administration? You're asking us to treat it as an emergency. Why don't you treat it as an emergency and demonstrate that with your activities that could cut through some of the bureaucratic red tape that is in fact delaying the things that are necessary to combat this scourge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the time.
Could I just say, if I might, and I welcome, I know that it isn't the subject matter here, but the head of CDC, Dr. Fauci, they're not bureaucrats. They're not, I don't know what their political affiliation is.
If I may, Dr. Fauci is at the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Disease at NIH.
But they're
And I
not
agree
the-
with you, he's not a bureaucrat, he's a scientist. And he is working on this.
Okay,
The
they're-
bureaucracy at the Centers for Disease Control and the bureaucracy at the Food and Drug Administration is where I have my problem with how the administration.
Okay, but then work it out. Don't delay the development of a vaccine. What's going to happen is, Ebola, I don't want to go back through that. Those who created this huge alarm about this country turned out to be wrong. But I don't want to go back over that because Zika is real. And I don't think we should wait until we see more incidents of births in this country.
And precisely my point, reclaiming my time, precisely my point. So why won't the president use the bully pulpit of the White House? Why will Dr. Frieden not use the bully pulpit of the CDC and say, look, we're going from a level 2 to a level 3 travel restriction. People ought to seriously consider any travel to an area where this virus is so prevalent.
Okay.
I want us to have the vaccine. I want us to have the vector control when the virus does arrive at our shores. I do want us to be prepared. But one of the things we could do right now would be to delay that day by a significant amount of time by not importing the virus from other parts of the world and infecting our citizens. It is morally irresponsible to do that. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the gentleman.
Mrs. Slaughter?
Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
We might as well vote right now. We know we don't have a voice or anything else, and if you want to say the earth is flat, you could vote it out, and we just couldn't do a thing about it. We're not doing all that much in this. We know 2 weeks ago, I think it was, we had the debate that you were talking about. That wasn't new money. $600 million of that money that we were going to put towards Zika was from the budget already of NIH.
Right.
And everybody seems to think that they were so happy to have it, but I have never seen a Congress in my life that could say to the head of NIH, we're going to take this away from you, and there'd be a fight over it. We know who'd win that. Just about, they have that same chance we have up here of passing something. We talked about as soon as it comes, we will fight it. Are we going to ask it to try to wait till we're ready? We're not able to stop a virus. We can't even see one. Bacterium can come and go and leave. But the mosquito part of it is so important because someone has Zika, mosquito bites them, that blood then is transferred to the next person that mosquito bites. And they do only bite people, as far as I know. I'd be embarrassed somehow to say that we're going to do a resolution that Congress believes that carbon tax would be detrimental to the United States economy. The United States economy is going to be suffering. Florida has already lost land to the rising waters. Texas, they've been up pretty much up to their neck, haven't they? How many people have died down floods in Texas?
A bunch.
A bunch.
We had,
Lord knows the climate is changing, and you know who knows it better than anybody? Have you all heard that Donald Trump applying for a fence for a golf course that he has? It's outside the United States. But the erosion was getting so bad that the application for the fence was based on the fact that climate change had changed the erosion. Now, you want to talk about the height of hypocrisy? He says over here there isn't any such thing. It's like for the United States to be saying this would not hurt us. You know what the excuse always used to be is we can't do it alone. It's just us out there trying to do the right thing, and China's making a mess. Well, 200 countries, I believe, have already gotten way ahead of us, including China. They're moving ahead, and it is improving their economy. China really got to the point where they can barely breathe. They are doing so much about pollution over there now. We're not. But the climate change here is so real that anybody in this world should understand it and be aware of it. We've had 92-degree days in upstate New York. I'm not aware of very much of that. That's an aberration. It's dry up there as a bone. I live down here, which had 16 days of rain in end of May and June, but I've been told by weather people that they've never seen the like of that. But we know that the seas are rising, and we know already that Florida is losing some ground, and somewhere up around the Aleutians, not the Aleutians, up around Alaska, some native lands, they've had to be absolutely abandoned and moved someplace else because of the changes in the ocean. I think it's gone beyond what we can say is just a normal thing, because it's happening way too quickly. And just in the last few years, we've seen enormous changes in erosion and changes in climate, changes in being able to farm, frankly, which is desperate for us to have the food for need. But let me tell you what's the biggest danger coming toward this Congress like a freight train. If we don't get a budget, we haven't got one, in October 1, this government shuts down. So NIH won't be doing anything over there. They won't be making vaccine or even working. But you know who will be? We're going to pass this week the ledge branch bill so that we will all be safe. We'll be taken care of. We can all go to work every day. Our staff can all come to work every day, but the rest of the government, shucks. It'll be all right. The last shutdown that Ted Cruz brought us took $24 billion out of this economy. A lot of it from mom and pop stores in federal buildings, in courthouses, in national parks, and all the kind of revenue that those people had. And it was just as cavalier as all get at. Oh, well. That's the way the place is being run now. Sure, there's no Zika. Well, there is. I just happened to have met with 5 people from the federal agencies. We were talking about antibiotics because that's been something I've been shouting at the rooftops about for about 8 years, the fact that we have just frittered them away. And I asked about Zika. We know it's here. Puerto Rico is almost epidemic. And they said there were some 700 cases in the United States. And you know we've already had 1 baby born with microcephaly. But again, that's a mosquito. It's the same mosquito apparently that carries dengue fever and other things. They're trying to, at NIH, they told me today, in CDC, to see if there's any relation with that, how that may be cross-contamination. They're in a very primitive state in what they're doing. This was one E. coli case of this woman who had the MC3. She survived it. They're really very much looking to see, checking all the time to try to find other examples of it, seeing what it means for cattle, which would certainly hurt the economy of the United States. But we better clean up. I mean, we're supposed to be smarter than everybody else, and that's what we're brought up to believe. The United States knows it. We got the answers. We're ahead. Nobody's going to catch us napping. Well, golly, they're going to catch us sound asleep here this time. But seriously, I meant it when I said a while ago, why don't we just vote? We know exactly what it's going to be, and there's not anything we can say or do, because, Mr. Hastings, I believe we've said or done it all, have we not? That's going to make 1 iota of difference here. Mr. Levin, God bless you for trying, but this is it. Just try to stay away from mosquitoes. Well, all of you, I appreciate that a lot. Make me feel a little better, sleep a little better at night. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. You know, Louise, I was watching over the weekend 1970s and 80s articles on President Jimmy Carter, and he predicted we'd be out of oil in 1990.
We just about are now.
Just about are, 2016. That's why we've got more than we've ever thought was there. It's amazing.
I understand that all the oil companies over there are pretty much understanding they're about to come to the end of the line, and a lot of coal companies understand the same thing. I think they've about blasted every mountain in the southeast down there where I used to live, taking the mountaintops off of all of them, polluted the water. Actually, what they're trying to do now is to find if there's enough money left from some of those companies to clean out the creeks and the rivers and the damage environmentally that they did by throwing that slag and all the rest of that coal, everything left over from that, into the drinking water of the people of that part of this country, which these are our brothers and sisters. Flint is very bad. Rochester tested all of its school, of their fountains. In every school district, and practically in my district, they have found lead in some of the fountains in the schools. They've closed them all down, and everybody's drinking out of bottled water right now. We've neglected ourselves so badly that there are over 100-year-old water systems throughout this country. In the Northeast, there are still water pipes, so to speak, that are made out of brick and wood. There's a tunnel under the Hudson River that's over 100 years old, and is in a very dangerous position. We had to emergency fix a bridge the other day. Our infrastructure is really falling apart, and part of that affects our health as well. I think we really need to wake up and smell the cooking here in what we're doing, and not pass silly resolutions like carbon is of no interest to us.
Mr. Woodall, welcome back home.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I believe I'll be handling this on the floor tomorrow, so I don't need to.
This is Rob Woodall week at the Rules Committee. Welcome home, the Rules
I
Committee.
appreciate it. I'm excited about that. And the truth is, I'd say to my friend from Louisiana, I'm excited about this legislation. I appreciate you bringing it forward. I can't tell you how frustrating it is to me that we really do have serious problems. Some of those serious problems have to do with keeping a competitive energy policy. Some of those serious problems have to do with keeping a competitive tax code, trying to take a tax code from being the very worst in the world for job creation to being the very best. And folks will absolutely perpetuate the irresponsible notion that if only we put a $10 a barrel tax on oil, that's going to change the direction of climate change, not just in this country, but on this planet. If we're going to be serious about climate change, let's be serious, and let's have a serious conversation. But we have limited dollars to spend, as has been the topic of every single person who's spoken in this committee. And there are people who can solve carbon more efficiently than others. And these kind of broad brush policies kill the folks who can deal with them the least, doing nothing to help folks who can deal with them the most. We're closing down perfectly good power plants in the state of Georgia, and we're building brand new solar arrays in the state of Georgia. I defy you to show me the science that says we're going to save more carbon by closing a perfectly good plant that has already been built and generating brand new construction for a new solar array than if we just let that plant live out its useful life. We can deal with these issues, as my friend from Louisiana knows. But these kinds of bumper sticker politics that the president included in his budget are not serious proposals. And candidly, when I talk to job creators in my district, they need a message from this Congress, particularly in a tumultuous time that we have in presidential politics these days, to know that we don't believe in these bumper sticker politics. We are serious about a competitive energy policy in this country, and far from being a meaningless resolution, I think this is incredibly powerful. Dr. Bustani?
Thank you. I thank the gentleman for giving me some time back here. The finest example of American exceptionalism is the U.S. energy industry, and I will defend that day in and day out. At a time when we thought we were going to have scarcity, our industry, American energy producers, have moved us to an era of abundance. They have flipped everything. And now the Saudis and the Iranians, the Russians, are fearful of what American technology and American innovation can do. And what does this president do? He puts a political statement in his budget to tax it and to stifle American competitiveness, both on the energy sector and the export side. It's just unconscionable. This country will move forward and grow jobs with a vibrant energy sector. And American innovation will solve the emissions issues in a smart way, not in a political way, in a costly way, in a way that costs jobs. We have lost a lot of American jobs already in the energy sector because of the war on this sector by this administration. The Bessie well control rule. New liability requirements that make no sense, that the director of BOEM admitted to me last week on the phone that they're backing off of some of this because they made no sense. And these emissions rules that we're looking at. And so I want to compliment my colleague from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise, for bringing forward his no carbon tax proposal. And I think it's absolutely ludicrous to put a $10.25 per tax on each barrel of oil in this country. That's basically not shooting ourselves in the foot, that's shooting ourselves in the head. I yield back.
And to my friend, Mr. Levin, I've been in this Congress 5.5 years now. You'd been in this Congress longer when we passed the Clean Air Act of 1990. I don't believe that if we had an honest conversation about what was a vigorous debate in this country about how to protect air quality in this country, a vigorous debate, a debate that captured what is best about the big things we can do when we work together. I don't believe that a man or woman who voted yes in this chamber in 1990 said they were voting to regulate carbon. That wasn't the debate that was being had. That is the hook on which the administration is hanging its regulatory authority, and shame on us for having it be the big issue that you and my friend from New York and others rightly suggest that it is, and to shirk our responsibility to legislate on it in favor of the administration regulating on it. Shame on us. And the conversation every single day should be, the administration is wrong to do it, and I, Sandy Levin, am going to put forward legislation so that we can rightly do it. We have lost the ability to legislate when members of both parties have capitulated to the wishes of their candidate in the White House rather than our obligations here in this body. I'm optimistic we're going to be able to turn that around. I'm so confident in the men and women who serve here. I believe we're going to turn that around. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much, sir. The gentleman from Florida. The gentleman from Florida does not seek time. Thank you very much. I have not seen the gentleman from Massachusetts yet. I'm just wanting to make sure I did not miss the gentleman, so we will. Good. We'll make sure that we're not trying to, I didn't know if I'd find him back with staff. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Chairman Cole.
Well, I didn't hear all of my good friends' remarks from Louisiana, but I can't imagine I disagreed with any of them because we have very similar views on this issue and obviously represent an energy industry that we are exceptionally proud of, and that honestly, I think the country ought to reflect on. The biggest raise any American worker's gotten in the last decades come courtesy of the American energy industry, and it's everything from cheaper heating and cooling for their home to lower gasoline prices. And the biggest break this country has gotten geopolitically and strategically has been the fact that we've moved from energy dependence essentially to energy independence, at the same time undercutting the financial power of some of our most difficult adversaries in the world, the Russians and some of the countries in the Middle East. So this is an industry that frankly shouldn't be attacked, that ought to be praised. It's unfortunate that that isn't recognized. Indeed, frankly, sometimes the administration tries to take credit for things it simply didn't do. I remember once the president trying to take credit for fracking, really, or for lower prices. There's nothing the administration's done to facilitate much of this. It's all been an achievement of the private sector that's enormously benefited people of our country. I think we ought to be unequivocal in our statement that we're not going to decide that raising the price of a gallon of gasoline and the cost of heating and cooling your home for every American is somehow the right thing to do. And that's what a $10 tax on oil would do. And I think, making it crystal clear, look, we get 80% of our energy from carbon. And I promise you, there won't be anybody in this room alive the day that there's no carbon-based energy in the United States. It's going to remain, for us and for the globe, the essential source of energy. I'm all for any methods to try to make it cleaner, to try and be more efficient, to try and use it wisely. But the idea that we would attack a whole industry or talk about putting coal miners out of work, or talking about, somehow the problems associated with the industry instead of the effects is just concerning to me. So I want to just associate myself quickly with my friend's remarks and with what you're trying to do here, because I think that too often people forget how much has been done for this country by the efforts of men and women in the energy industry, not just oil and gas, but coal and every other kind of carbon-based energy. It is something that's extraordinary. We enjoy cheaper and more secure energy than anybody else on the planet, any major power on the planet. And again, the benefits that have come our way from this extraordinary technological innovation over the last 10 or 15 years are something that rival everything that's been done in the high-tech industries and the Googles and the Microsofts and some of the other industries that we celebrate. So I appreciate my friend's efforts and look forward to supporting him on the floor. Yield back, Mr.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Collins. Gentleman does not seek time. Mr. Byrne. Mr. Newhouse.
Like my friend from Oklahoma, did not hear all the comments from the panel this afternoon, but very much interested in this topic, coming from the state of Washington, where our current governor this is a key priority of his, and so we will be, as a state, probably a very good test case for cap and trade here in the near future, and we will see. Very much interested in the debate we're going to have on this bill, both these bills in the next day or so, to really highlight some of the things that I think are important that we need to consider in this legislation. Competitiveness in all kinds of areas of our economy is key, and I'm just concerned that instituting some of these policies that are underscored in these bills is going to put us at a competitive disadvantage if we are not smart about how we do this. And so this is something we all need to pay very close attention to keep our country in the most competitive situation possible as we move forward, while at the same time being responsible with our environment. And I think we can do both. So I have no questions for the panel, but I just think that this is a very important topic we need to pay close attention to, and thank you for your bringing
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Newhouse. Does the gentleman from Colorado seek time? Gentleman does not seek time. Is there any other member that would wish to speak to our panel? Seeing none, I want to thank the panel not only for its time to come as expert witnesses, but for your camaraderie that was involved in that collegial experience, and I want to thank both of you very much. If you'll please make sure you leave anything you brought in writing for our awesome stenographer, she would appreciate it also. Is there any other member that would seek to give testimony on H-Con Res 89 or H-Con Res 112? Seeing none, this now closes the hearing portion of H-Con Res 89 and H-Con Res 112. The committee will now be open to having two distinguished members who will be representing the Budget Committee and the Energy and Commerce Committee, the gentleman, Mr. Whitfield, and the gentlewoman, Ms. Castor. This opens up the hearing on H4775, Ozone Standards Implementation Act of 2016. Ms. Castor, we're delighted that you're coming back to your former committee. You are missed on the committee. I know that the circumstances surrounding this has enabled you to develop your content in other areas, but we're delighted that you're here with us. Mr. Chairman, I've already stated that we would give you and the gentlewoman, anything you brought in writing will be entered in the record without objection. We'll get that done. The gentleman is now recognized.
Well, Mr. Chairman and members of the Rules Committee, thank you very much for this opportunity to discuss H.R. 4775, the Ozone Standards Implementation Act of 2016. I might say that it does a number of things, but the primary thing that it does, it phases in implementation of the 2008-2015 ozone standards, extending the date for final designation for the latter standard to 2025. Without this legislation, it's got to be 2017 is the date that it has to be implemented. I would also say that this legislation is being brought in response to genuine concerns expressed by state EPA authorities around the country. including groups from California, from Florida, from Texas, from Nevada, Utah, Connecticut, many other states. It comes as a result of a number of hearings that we've had on these ambient air quality standards. It also comes as a result of 4 forums that were held on the Clean Air Act and the need for reform to the Clean Air Act. I think everyone in this room would acknowledge that the Clean Air Act has been very effective. On the ambient air quality standards alone, the criteria of pollutants have been reduced by over 63% since the Clean Air Act went into effect. Carbon dioxide emissions have been reduced to their lowest levels in about 20 years. So we've made great progress, and I want to just read because I understand that some people view the Clean Air Act as sacrosanct. If you try to change anything, you're trying to roll back. You're trying to eviscerate the act. And I just want to read a couple of statements by the director of the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District in California. And I could read a lot of statements from a lot of EPA directors, but this gentleman says, H.R. 4775 helps reduce the current chaotic nature of the transition between standards by requiring that EPA issue guidance on implementing new standards in a timely manner. He also says that the last thing that 4775 does is roll back anything in the Clean Air Act as far as protecting the public. So what he's talking about here is when EPA comes forward with their ambient air quality standards, they genuinely, they never come forth with the implementing standards, the guidance. For example, the 2008 standard, EPA did not provide the states with the guidance until 2015. And every state is saying, this is so complicated today, we need these guidance from the EPA. If they're going to set the new standard, we simply want the guidance. And so this bill, that's what it does. It said, you set the standard, you provide the guidance, because states need it. Now, we all know the impact if you're in a non-attainment area, and there are many areas of the country still in non-attainment of the 2008 standard. And the 2015, there's going to be a lot more areas in non-attainment. And the problem with it is that if you are in a non-attainment area, it drastically affects your economic growth. And I know that's not our only concern, but with our current jobs report, and we know that the economy is still sputtering, we don't want to create additional obstacles to economic growth. So this bill helps streamline it, and it was formed and written based on the testimony of these state EPA executive directors, the EPA at the state level, as well as the air pollution control districts in states like California. And by the way, Los Angeles, they're not in compliance with 2008. San Joaquin Valley, they're not in compliance with 2008. And EPA is not even including the cost of them ever becoming in compliance because they don't think they ever will be in compliance. But I just want to mention a couple of other things that this legislation does. It authorizes the EPA administrator to consider, not mandate, not require, but consider the feasibility of the technology to meet the standard. Is it technologically feasible? At least consider that. It authorizes, it changes, as I've said earlier, the mandatory review. Under the Clean Air Act, it's mandatory EPA review it every 5 years. This goes to 10 years. EPA can still do it in 5 years if they want to, 2 years, but it gives them the leverage of going to 10. We ensure that the EPA administrator, prior to revising these national ambient air quality standards, that they obtain advice. They don't have to listen to it, but obtain advice from the agency's independent scientific advisory committee regarding potential adverse effects. And then we ensure that the EPA administrator, as I said earlier, issues timely implementation regulations and guidance so that states have some framework of how to move forward. We ensure that for certain ozone and particulate matter non-attainment areas, states are not required to include economically infeasible methods of dealing with it. Right now, they are. Even if it's infeasible to do it economically, if it's economically infeasible, they still have to do it. We're simply saying you don't have to do that anymore. We're also ensuring that states may seek relief with respect to certain exceptional events, including droughts. This was brought up specifically by the San Joaquin Valley group. And then we also direct EPA for the first time ever to submit a report to Congress on the impacts of foreign emissions on the ambient air quality standards, compliance, and related matters in the U.S. And that came about because of the statements of many Western states that they're having great difficulty because of emissions coming in from outside of America. So we're not trying to destroy the Clean Air Act, not trying to roll it back, but simply responding to concerns made by people in the states with the responsibility to implement the Clean Air Act. And I genuinely appreciate you all giving me the opportunity to discuss this. I might also add that I will be offering an amendment on the floor if it's approved by you all. We've discovered that CBO that it will cost $2 million to do the studies necessary that we're asking for in here. But when we considered that EPA did not get an additional appropriation to implement their clean energy plan, which cost a lot more than $2 million, they basically reprogram money that we can do that to study the impact of this foreign emissions coming into the U.S. So thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Ms. Castro, we're delighted that you're with us. Gentleman is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's a pleasure to be here with my colleague, Mr. Whitfield, from the Energy and Power Subcommittee of Energy and Commerce. And thank you for your kind words. It's a pleasure to be back in the Rules Committee. It reminds me of kind of one of the golden ages of this committee when, with the help of my colleagues, Mr. McGovern, Mr. Hastings, and of course, then Chairwoman Slaughter, we passed Wall Street reform, we passed the GI Bill for the 21st century, the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, the Recovery Act, made sure that millions of our neighbors have health care under the Affordable Care Act. Chairwoman Slaughter then also was the primary author of the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. So it's nice to be back here. It brings me back to a time when the Congress was firing on all cylinders and we were all working together for the benefit of our country. And I wish I could say today that this bill does that, but unfortunately, House Bill 4775 is a radical attempt to gut the Clean Air Act. And it's unfortunate because the Clean Air Act for the past 50 years, remember it was a bipartisan law adopted back in the 1970s. And it has worked well for decades. It is a law that requires the EPA and the government to look at the best science and make decisions based on the science. What the Clean Air Act requires is it requires that EPA go to a science committee that every few years the science committee reports back, and then the EPA establishes ambient air quality standards. And then they leave it to the states and industry and stakeholders to determine how you meet the goals of the Clean Air Act. It has been enormously effective. The Clean Air Act sets levels for 6 air pollutants: ozone, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, carbon monoxide, lead, and particulate matter. And between 1980 and 2014, emissions of these 6 air pollutants dropped by 63%. Some people say, wait a minute, this could have a serious impact on our economy. Well, to the contrary, during that time, the nation's gross domestic product increased by 147%. Vehicle miles traveled increased 97%, energy consumption increased 26%, and the U.S. population grew by 41%. So we can do, you've got to give credit to the American people and American ingenuity. Because look across the ocean at China. Their economy is really struggling, and part of it is because they can't get a handle on their pollution. Same thing from India. It'll be interesting what Prime Minister Modi says tomorrow, because this is a real challenge for their people. So it would be irresponsible for this Congress to go backwards on such a successful law and roll back the Clean Air Act. What this bill would allow polluters to override the scientists. That would lead to air quality standards based on the potential impact to industry profits rather than health. It removes the important firewall separating the setting of standards from their implementation and virtually guarantees that the public will never know if the air they breathe is safe. This would really roll back decades of progress that we have made. And furthermore, when you think about a lot of the arguments over the past decades on the Clean Air Act, industry has always exaggerated the claims, and many of their claims never come true. And despite repeated assertions that achieving clean air was just not feasible in this country, American ingenuity has consistently risen to the challenge and made our country both a leader in clean air and clean air technology. Now let's talk about some of the specifics here, because this is where it's very problematic. The bill drastically delays implementation of the 2015 ozone ambient air quality standard by up to 8 years. See, back in October, the EPA issued a final rule after thousands of studies and a lot of input, and they said it is important in America, it's important to the health of our neighbors to go from 75 parts per billion ozone to 70. It's doable. This bill would eviscerate that. The bill also doubles the ambient air quality standards review period for all criteria, air pollutants, to every 10 years. They're saying it's okay to ignore the science in America, and I know you all do not believe that. You know, it doesn't require EPA to act every 5 years, but it does require them to review the science. And it's just not right to say, let's put it off to every 10 years. Think about how quickly scientific discoveries evolve and how quickly we're making discoveries. The bill also changes the criteria from one based solely upon protecting the public health to one that says it has to be technically feasible. And like I said, this is an important role for the states. It's important for the scientists to determine the health impacts, and then for states, stakeholders, local governments, then to determine how best to implement their clean air plans at home. The bill also gives new and expanded facilities amnesty from new air quality standards. It also drastically expands the definition of exceptional events. So if you just have a really hot day, this bill creates a loophole. You can drive a truck through it. We're going to have a lot of really hot days. That shouldn't let a community or state or polluter off the hook for the pollutants they're putting into the air. And I know you all do not support amnesty. There is also, if I hearken back to my time as an environmental lawyer before I arrived in the Congress, we were always very concerned for our existing clients, the impact of what a new industrial user would do. And this is a real fear in the bill, and I think it's going to create a lot of litigation if it were ever come to be. It says that new facilities in their pre-construction review do not have to use the best technical controls and clean air controls. If that happens, then all of our existing industrial users will have to bear the burden of any new polluter that comes online. That's not fair, and I know that's not what you would say to your existing businesses in your districts. So I'd ask you to think about rejecting this bill, sending it back to the drawing board. Other nations are realizing what America learned long ago, that unregulated emissions of dangerous air pollutants is unsustainable. And the Clean Air Act has helped us make dramatic improvements in air quality over the past decades. Our economy has grown during this time. demonstrating that we can have both healthy air and we can have a vibrant economy. And I urge you to do this. I don't think there's any way to salvage this bill, but I would encourage you to adopt at least an open rule so that we can try to make some improvements. But in the end, I would urge you to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The figures of job growth have just come out, as we're aware. And based upon last month's job report, the U.S. employers added 38,000 jobs in May, the worst month since September 2010. Labor force participation rate is now at a four-decade low at 62.6%, and a record 94.7 million Americans are not in the labor force. Then you contrast this, you mentioned Prime Minister Modi from India coming here, a brand-new prime minister who is actively trying to grow the economy. India, 7.9% GDP growth. Well, howdy, I know, Mr. Whitfield, that rules and regulations are killing not only our numbers, they're killing our jobs. They're making it more expensive, and they're trying to hype what this fear in our economy about how bad this issue is, rather than face the reality that we need to be competitive. I want to thank you for bringing your bill to us today. So Exhibit A is really exactly the facts of the case. The most current facts of the case is Exhibit A about the destructive nature of rules and regulations by the Obama administration and by Democrats who support that agenda. And I want to thank you for being here. Chairman Cole?
No questions. I just want to associate myself quickly with your remarks and thank both of our good friends for being here. They're both really terrific members. I have the opportunity to serve on the Budget Committee with my friend from Florida, and I'm a proud member of the Turkish Caucus, which my friend from Kentucky chairs. So always good to have them here. Yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back his time. The gentlewoman, Mrs. Slaughter.
No questions.
Does not seek
But
time.
thank you, Ms. Castro, thank you.
Isn't it great to see Kathy up here?
Yes, it's always good to see Kathy anywhere.
Yeah, okay, well, anywhere then.
She was a great addition when she was here.
Yeah, she is very helpful with us every year as we take young students from around the country who come and try and offer leadership roles. And I want to thank Ms. Castro for her active participation with that effort. Thank you very much.
It's a shame you never get any amendments, though, isn't it?
Oh, well,
But you
yeah.
should stop about now.
Mr. Woodall does not seek time. Is there any other member of the committee? The gentleman from Massachusetts.
I just want to ask unanimous consent to insert in the record the statement of administration policy that says if the president were presented with H.R. 4775, his senior advisors would recommend that he veto the bill. I yield back my time.
Thank you very much. Without objection, I'd like to add the jobs report that came in that I have this information on. Thank you very much. Dr. Burgess does not seek time. Judge Hastings.
Mr. Chairman, I would ask unanimous consent to include in the record the May 10th letter indicating a desire to have members vote no on 4775, led by Allergy and Asthma Network, along with a significant number of our nation's leading associations, the American Lung Association, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and the March of Dimes. And I won't belabor it by going further. I just simply add, Mr. Chairman, if there's anyone that thinks that the environmental quality of air does not affect our lungs, then I'll question seriously whether or not that person or persons would understand science. I've lived in communities in this country where asthma has impacted people. And I've gone to school with children and young adults, and seeing them when they are laboring under asthma attacks. I, for one, would like to see a day when we did everything that we could to avoid that kind of discomfort for any one of the citizens of this great country of ours. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate the gentleman's comments very much. Gentleman yields back his time. Is there any other member of the committee that seeks time? Is there any other member on the Democrat side that seeks time? Thank you very much. I want to thank you, both of you, for taking time to be here today, for making your best ideas available to the committee as we look at this legislation. And thank you very much. If you please make sure that you leave anything you brought in writing for our awesome stenographer to allow her an opportunity to complete her work. And thank you very much. Is there any other member that would seek time before the committee on H.R. 4775? Okay. Mr. Post, do you seek time?
I have an amendment I want to talk about.
The gentleman is recognized.
Oh, okay. Shall I do that now?
Yes, sir.
So I'm offering as an amendment, a bill called the Breathe Act, which is relevant to the ozone bill that we're considering. Since we're considering a spending today discussing the importance of the Clean Air Act and changes and ideas to make it more effective, I've offered an amendment that I've had as a bill with a number of sponsors for some time that helps close one of the loopholes in the Clean Air Act. The purpose of the law and the updates the EPA has provided are to protect our health and safety of our constituents. And my amendment, based off the Breathe Act, would simply close the oil and gas industry's loopholes to the Clean Air Act's aggregation requirement. Currently, oil and gas operators are exempt from the aggregation requirement in the Clean Air Act because small air pollution sources that cumulatively release as much air pollution as a major source are required to curb pollution by installing the maximum achievable control technology. Now, the aggregation requirement is intended to protect the public from small air pollution sources that individually might be harmless. Think one single source of emission. But together, for instance, in a county in Colorado where there's 20,000 fracking wells, together would have the air quality impact of several large factories or hundreds of thousands of cars. And in fact, there are areas of northern Colorado and Wyoming with worse air quality than major cities like Los Angeles and New York. So we simply can't round these small sources down, if you will, to zero. They do need to be looked at in the aggregate. Because we simply need to make sure that we're accountable for the quality of our air, regardless of whether the source of the pollutant is one large factory or, in this case, many small. You can call them factories. That's what they kind of look like. I'm sure the gentleman coming from an extraction region in Texas has also kind of seen how it looks. My amendment would also add hydrogen sulfide to the Clean Air Act's federal list of hazardous air pollutants. Hydrogen sulfide is currently exempt, even though it's been associated with a wide range of health issues, including nausea, vomiting, heartaches, eye, nose, and throat irritation. Hydrogen sulfide can be released from wellheads, pumps, pipes, storage tanks, flaring. 15 to 25% of natural gas wells in the U.S. emit hydrogen sulfide as well. As the gentleman might note, I'm a little hoarse today. Maybe it's because of hydrogen sulfide, because of all the fracking in my home state of Colorado, or it's because I simply picked up a cold from our 4-year-old son. But regardless, we need to make sure that regardless of the source of the air pollutants, that they're looked at under the Clean Air Act. This amendment simply ensures that the oil and gas industry takes measures to avoid the release of hydrogen sulfide by adding hydrogen sulfide to the list of hazardous air pollutants, not banned, simply added to the list like many others are, and by listing oil and gas wells as, of course, a major source of hydrogen sulfide, which they are, in fact, the leading source in communities like mine. I ask that my amendment be made in order, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. The gentleman has now placed his amendment before the committee. Does any member of the committee have questions about the gentleman from Colorado? I'll first start on the Republican side. Does any member seek questioning? Thank you very much. Does any member, they do not. Mr. Polis, thank you very much for speaking to us about your amendment. Is there any other member that would seek time? Seeing none, this now closes the hearing portion of H.R. 4775, the Ozone Standards Implementation Act of 2016. And I want to thank the committee for its indulgence. We will now move forth. And I would defer to the gentleman from Oklahoma for the purpose of an amendment. The Chairman Cole's recognized for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move the committee grant H.R. 4775, the Ozone Standards Implementation Act of 2016, a structured rule. The rule provides 1 hour of general debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and the ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule makes in order as original text for the purpose of amendment, the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on Energy and Commerce, now printed in the bill, and provides that it shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against the amendment in the nature of a substitute. The rule makes in order only those further amendments printed in the Rules Committee report. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in the report. The rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions. The rule also provides for consideration of H. Con Res 89, expressing the sense of Congress that a carbon tax would be detrimental to the United States economy, and H. Con Res 112, expressing the sense of the Congress opposing the President's proposed $10 tax on every barrel of oil under closed rules. The rule provides 1 hour of debate on each concurrent resolution, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Ways and Means. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of each concurrent resolution. The rule provides that each concurrent resolution shall be considered as read and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. Finally, the rule waives all points of order against provisions in each concurrent resolution.
You've now heard the motion from the gentleman, chairman from Oklahoma. Is there amendment or discussion to that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have an
You're
amendment.
recognized.
I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee grant H.R. 4775, H-Con Res 89, and H-Con Res 112, each in open rule so that all members have the opportunity to offer amendments on the floor.
Thank you very much. You've now heard the amendment from the gentlewoman. Is there discussion? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the slaughter amendment. Those in favor say an aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no.
Roll call.
Noes have it, noes have it.
Please.
Gentlewoman asked for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox, Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess, no. Mr. Stivers. Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins, no. Mr. Byrne. Mr. Byrne, no. Mr. Newhouse. Mr. Newhouse, no. Ms. Slaughter.
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern. Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings, aye. Mr. Polis. Mr. Polis, aye. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk will report the total.
4 yeas, 7 nays.
Amendment's not agreed to. Further amendment or discussion? Seeing none, the vote will now be on the motion from the gentlewoman from Oklahoma, Chairman Cole. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. No. Ayes have it, ayes have it. Gentlewoman asks for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox, Mr. Cole. Aye. Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Woodall. Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess, aye. Mr. Stivers. Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins, aye. Mr. Byrne. Aye. Mr. Byrne, aye. Mr. Newhouse. Mr. Newhouse, aye. Ms. Slaughter. Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern. Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Hastings, no. Mr. Polis. Mr. Polis, no. Mr. Chairman.
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk will report the total.
7 yeas, 4 nays.
The motion is agreed to, and accordingly, the gentleman from Georgia, this will be the Rob Woodall week. We're going to give Rob the work all week long. And Mr. Polis from Colorado will be managing that for Democrats. I would like to announce that tomorrow at 3:00 p.m., we will meet here at the fabulous Rules Committee on the legislative branch appropriations and the Puerto Rico bill. So thank you very much. Welcome back, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. We've now completed our work for the day.